All right, so in this lesson on left-hand voicings, the first thing we're going to kind of get into is we're going to look at these left-hand voicings through the lens of a 2-5-1 progression. And 2-5-1 progression, as most of you probably know, is 80 to 90% of the chord progressions that you'll see in the really standard jazz tunes. So the way we get to this 2-5-1 progression is very simple. If we're looking at it, let's look at it in the key of B flat major. So we know we have two flats, B flat and E flat. So we give each note in the scale, in the major scale, a number that corresponds to the degree of the scale. So for example, B flat being the 1 is labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay? So the 2-5-1 progression really just refers to the second degree of the scale, the fifth degree of the scale, and the first degree of the scale. And what we're going to do is we're going to build chords off of those different degrees of the scale. So 2-5-1 progression, the first chord is a 2 chord. So if we build a chord off of the second degree of the scale, we're going to stack thirds on top of it basically. So we see that we end up with a C minor 7 chord. So that's what we call the 2 chord or minor chord. So we have C minor 7. Now we go to the fifth degree of the scale, the F. We're going to stack thirds on top of that. We have an F7, an F dominant chord. So the 5 in the 2-5-1 progression is dominant. So the 2 is minor 7, the 5 is dominant 7. Now we're going to go to the 1. We build thirds off of that. And we see that the 1 chord is a major 7 chord. So 3 different chords, 3 different chord qualities. The 2 is minor, the 5 is dominant, and the 1 is major. Now that seems pretty easy, seems pretty straight ahead, and it's probably just a refresher for most students. But I think the one thing that gets missed sometimes is that we're building 3 different chords, but we're really just using one scale. Okay? We're really just using one collection of pitches, and that collection of pitches is the B flat major scale. So for these 7 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the octave, of course, but for these 7 unique pitches, we're really able to build these 3 different chords. So as you can see, C minor 7, F dominant 7, and B flat major 7, they're all using notes in those chords that are straight out of the B flat major scale. Okay? Now why is that important? Well, it's important because we can refer back to the chord scale to identify the pitches that are contained in these chords. So that sounds kind of, like a lot of information. Let's make it make sense. When we talk about the 2 chord, the C minor in this instance, C minor 7, the chord scale, the scale that corresponds to that C minor 7 chord, is referred to as C Dorian. But all it really is a B flat major scale that begins and ends on C. So remember, here's our B flat major scale. We're going to play that same scale, but we're going to start it on C. And when we do that, we call it C Dorian. So the second degree, you've probably heard this before, but maybe it hasn't made sense. The second degree of a major scale, so the second degree of B flat major, is Dorian. Okay? When we start and end a scale on that second degree of the major chord, of the major scale, we end up with a Dorian. And if you want to think about it a little bit differently, the other way to think about it is, well, to go from a major scale, i.e. if we're in C major, all white notes, the way we get from C major to C Dorian is to flat the 3rd and flat the 7th. Okay? Which in essence just brings us right back to B flat major. So it's another way of thinking about it. So there we have C Dorian. That's the chord scale that corresponds to C minor 7 when we're in the key of B flat. The same, we also have a chord scale for the 5 chord, the F7. Okay, when we start and end a B flat major scale on F, that's called mixolydian. So starting and ending a B flat major scale on F gives us the F mixolydian scale. The other way to think about that, to go kind of in reverse, if we have F major, here's an F major scale. What are we doing to F major in order to get F mixolydian? Well, we're flatting the 7th by a half step. So we end up with F mixolydian. You can think of it that way. A mixolydian scale is the major scale with the flatted 7th. Or you can think of it as the 5th degree of a major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Start and end your B flat major scale on the 5th, and you'll get a mixolydian. And then, of course, we have a name for the 1. The 1 chord as well has a chord scale. It's just a major scale, of course, but in terms of modes, we refer to it as Ionian. Okay, so a lot of that information was just to kind of get you to understand where all this comes from. But basically what I want you to see before we get deeper into this left-handed voicing thing is, here are the root positions of these chords. Root position meaning the root is in the bass, root's in the bottom. Root 3, 5, 7, C minor 7, root 3, 5, 7, F7, root 3, 5, 7, B flat major 7. And the next step I want you to do is I'd like you to go through and play that in all the inversions. So this is root position like we just said, but we can invert that, put that root up the octave, and we get this. And if we keep going that way, putting the lowest note up the octave. So you have all these different ways that you can play C minor 7. Different inversions. Let's do the same for F7. Root position, we're going to invert it, invert that, invert that. Okay, so we have 4 different inversions, 4 different positions anyway for F7, and the same for B flat major 7. We can play it here, we can play it here, invert it again, and once more. All right? Now what we're going to do in the next chapter is we're going to see how to take these block chords and free up your left hand to play some cooler extensions on those voicings, all right? See you in chapter 2.